It started with champagne, yachts, and platinum records. But behind the flashing lights, a darker beat pulsed. Now, years later, the empire of Sean Diddy Combs is shaking, and the allegations are nothing short of horrifying. This isn't just another celebrity scandal. This is a federal investigation, and it might destroy everything he built. Hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear is the kind of truth they try to bury. Sean Combs was the man who could sell anything, music, style, even dreams. From Harlem to Hollywood, he became a brand. Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Diddy. It didn't matter what you called him. He was the king of hip-hop, the man behind Bad Boy Records, and the mogul who turned grief into gold after Biggie's death. But now, he's facing accusations that echo the worst corners of the industry. Drugs, coercion, assault, trafficking, and federal agents aren't just investigating. They're raiding his homes. The first crack in the mirror. It all started quietly. A lawsuit here, a whisper there. Some wrote it off as opportunism. Others called it karma. But in 2023, when singer Cassie Ventura, Diddy's ex-partner of a decade, filed a bombshell lawsuit alleging years of abuse, rape, and manipulation, people stopped laughing. The lawsuit was settled in less than 24 hours. That raised eyebrows, because fast settlements don't always mean innocence. Sometimes they mean silence has a price. Then the floodgates opened. In just months, 5 more lawsuits followed. Former employees, models, associates, all telling similar stories. Lavish parties, locked doors, forced acts, drugs, violence, silence. And then the Fed stepped in. March 25, 2024. Federal agents raided Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami. Helicopters, tactical gear, boxes of evidence. It wasn't just for show. They were looking for links to human trafficking and coordinated abuse. This wasn't just about celebrities anymore. This was about power and how far it could go unchecked. Behind the music, Diddy once stood shoulder to shoulder with presidents, billionaires, and rap legends. But now, he's surrounded by attorneys, sealed documents, and federal heat. The lawsuits tell a chilling pattern. Girls recruited through the music scene. Parties that turned violent. Surveillance footage wiped clean. Victims gaslit and paid off. Each new detail paints a darker picture. And the internet? It exploded. Hashtag Cancel Diddy trended. His name vanished from award shows. Sponsors fled. Even former allies went silent. What's really going on? The federal government doesn't raid your home unless they believe you're hiding something serious. Not in one state, but in 2. Not just for civil suits, but for criminal conduct. And while Diddy has denied all allegations, the court of public opinion is in session, and it's not going well for him. He claims this is a smear campaign. But how do you explain 6 lawsuits in 6 months? And the Department of Homeland Security at your door? This might just be the most explosive case in hip-hop history. And still, it gets darker. Because while Diddy's world burns in headlines, another case, one long buried, is quietly rising from the shadows. A girl from a small town. A case that was solved, but never felt right. Her name was Holly Bobo. And this time, people want real answers. What connects a powerful music mogul and a small-town nursing student? Why are both names lighting up the true crime world? Right now, subscribe and stay close. In the next chapter, we're going back to Tennessee, to the day a beautiful young woman vanished into the woods, and the justice system began to unravel. You don't want to miss what comes next. Holly Bobo, the girl who disappeared at sunrise. She was just a 20-year-old nursing student, blonde hair, big dreams. A normal morning in Parsons, Tennessee, until she vanished. No forced entry, no ransom note, just a bloodstain, and a town that's never slept right since. This isn't just a mystery, it's a mess. And even after a conviction, the questions haven't stopped. What really happened to Holly Bobo? It was April 13th, 2011. A quiet Wednesday in rural Tennessee. Holly Bobo had just gotten ready for school. She packed her things, said goodbye to her mom. She walked outside her house, right before 8 a.m. And then she was gone. Her brother Clint saw something strange from the window. Holly walking into the woods with a man dressed in camouflage. At first, he thought it was her boyfriend. But it wasn't. That wasn't anyone they knew. That was the last time anyone saw Holly alive. Blood on the carport. When police arrived, they found a smear of blood near the garage. A sign of struggle, but no signs of a break-in. There were no suspects, no leads, no motive, just a girl who vanished in daylight from her own front yard. The search began. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, thousands of acres combed, but not a single clue. Weeks passed, then months, and the story began to fade from the national news. But locals, they never forgot. And Holly's family, they never stopped pushing. The case suddenly breaks. Years later, fast forward to 2014, 3 years after the disappearance. Out of nowhere, police arrest a man named Zach Adams, a 29-year-old from nearby Decatur County, known for drugs, violence, and a bad temper. Authorities claimed they had a witness, a jailhouse informant, who said Zach confessed to killing Holly. But here's where it gets weird. There was no physical evidence, no murder weapon, no clear timeline. And the witness? He was trading info for a lighter sentence. Still, prosecutors pressed forward. They charged Zach Adams with kidnapping, rape, and murder. What happened to Holly? In 2014, searchers finally found her remains. Scattered bones in the woods, partially buried, over 20 miles from her home. It was confirmation of what the Bobo family feared. Holly was dead. But how did she die? Who really killed her? And why? The trial began in 2017. It was one of the most emotional trials Tennessee had seen. Witnesses described screams, assault, a body thrown into the woods like trash. But again, no DNA, no video, no confession, only testimony from criminals with something to gain. Still, the jury believed it. Zach Adams was convicted, sentenced to life in prison. But even today, many ask, did they convict the right man? The doubts that never died. Critics say the case was rushed once it went cold for too long, that police needed anyone to blame, that the witnesses lied, and that the real story has never been told. The man arrested for helping Zach, he walked. Another suspect also walked. One even testified against Zach in exchange for immunity. Does that sound like justice? Or a deal with the devil? The public started asking, what if this whole case is built on a lie? What if Holly's killer is still out there? Why it's trending again? In early 2025, a new true crime podcast, What Happened to Holly Bobo, hit the top of the charts. It re-examined the case from scratch, interviews, hidden evidence, and a bombshell theory that Holly may have been targeted by a local drug ring with ties to law enforcement. The podcast exposed inconsistencies in police statements and missing evidence that was never explained in court. Suddenly, the world started paying attention again. Was Holly just an innocent girl caught in a small-town nightmare? Or did she stumble into something bigger and darker than anyone realized? Hit that subscribe button, because next, we'll peel back the layers of both cases and show how power, silence, and influence shaped two very different paths to justice. You won't believe the connections. Diddy's inner circle, the whispers that grew louder. Fame gives you access. Money gives you power. But behind the velvet ropes of Diddy's world, something sinister was hiding. Staff quit, partners fled, and some began whispering what no one wanted to hear. That the parties weren't just wild, they were violent. That the mansion gates weren't protecting him, they were trapping others inside. For years, Diddy cultivated an image of control. A sharp suit, a private jet, a mogul with a Midas touch. But inside the walls of his empire, cracks were forming. Bodyguards, assistants, event staff. They started talking. Not in court, not on record, but behind closed doors, the stories began to stack up. The parties everyone feared. At first, it was the usual. Alcohol, celebrities, loud music. Then came the whispers of something else. Drugs, voyeurism, Aggression. One former employee said, "Once the doors locked, the real party started. And no one, especially the women, was safe." Another. You weren't allowed to take your phone inside. Not for privacy, for control. Victims say they were flown across the country, put in designer clothes, given champagne, and then stripped of every boundary they had. Cassie's allegations, a turning point. In 2023, Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit, and it sent shockwaves through the industry. 10 years. That's how long she says Diddy abused her. Not just physically, but emotionally and sexually. Beatings, isolation, forced acts with other men while Diddy watched. And the worst part, she says he filmed everything. She wasn't the first to suffer. She was just the first with the courage and the platform to go public. Within days, the case was settled. But the silence came too late. The story was out, and the walls began closing in. Other women stepped forward. After Cassie, more women spoke up. A model from Miami, a former backup dancer, even a man who worked security. Their stories echoed one another. Coercion, threats, surveillance, payments for silence. One lawsuit alleged a pattern. Young women invited to industry events, drugged, then filmed. If they resisted, their careers were over. Their reputations destroyed. Diddy responds. Diddy's legal team dismissed the claims as a money grab. They said he was the victim of a targeted smear campaign, that the stories were false, fabricated for fame. But behind closed doors, even those closest to him began to step back. Brand partners suspended deals. Sponsors disappeared. Fellow artists went silent. And fans started asking, did we miss the signs? The homes raided. In March 2024, the Department of Homeland Security raided Diddy's properties in Los Angeles and Miami. Helicopters circled overhead. Agents entered with rifles and warrants. Computers, phones, hard drives. Everything was seized. They weren't looking for stolen goods. They were looking for something worse. Evidence of trafficking, coercion, and digital blackmail. The optics were devastating. And the message was clear. This wasn't a rumor anymore. This was a criminal investigation. And then came the flight rumors. Just weeks after the raids, rumors surfaced. Diddy was planning to flee. Private jets, international contacts. It was all speculation until his legal team denied it. But in the world of high-powered elites, flight is a real fear. When justice catches up, even billionaires run. But what if justice never really gets there? What if power buys silence? Again, in the next chapter, we return to Parsons, Tennessee. Because while Diddy's world spun into chaos, the truth about Holly Bobo still hasn't been told. And new evidence is rattling the case. Tap that like button. Hit subscribe. You won't believe what we're about to uncover next. Holly's case reopened. The details that don't add up. They said the case was closed. The killer convicted. Justice served. But something still felt wrong. The timeline didn't make sense. The witnesses didn't match. The story didn't hold. And now, years later, the case of Holly Bobo is cracking open again. Because justice with missing pieces is just a puzzle of lies, the state of Tennessee declared victory in 2017. Zach Adams was found guilty of kidnapping, raping, and murdering Holly Bobo. A life sentence without parole. The courtroom cheered. The Bobo family cried. The town exhaled. But as the years passed and the headlines faded, people started asking the one question the court never really answered. Did he actually do it? The timeline problem. April 13th, 2011. Holly disappears just before 8 a.m. Clint Bobo, her brother, sees her walking into the woods with a man in camouflage. He doesn't realize anything is wrong until it's too late. But Zach Adams? He was supposedly at his home an hour away. Cell tower data placed his phone in a different area at the critical time. His alibi wasn't ironclad, but it wasn't nothing either. So, how did prosecutors pin the entire crime on him? One word, testimony. The jailhouse informants. The key witnesses against Zach Adams weren't eyewitnesses. They were inmates, people in jail for unrelated crimes, some facing life sentences. They claimed Zach had confessed behind bars, that he bragged about killing Holly, that he described her begging for her life. But there were no recordings, no signatures, no way to verify any of it, and every single one of them received sentence reductions or deals after their testimonies. One juror later said, "We had to go with what we had. The prosecution made it feel real." But real feelings aren't real facts. The other suspects. Zach wasn't the only one arrested. There was Jason Autry, a known criminal with a violent past. He struck a deal to testify against Zach, claiming he helped dispose of Holly's body in exchange for a reduced sentence. But Jason's story kept changing. First, he said Holly was alive in the truck, then dead, then maybe not. He couldn't remember where they went, what Zach said, or even how Holly died. Still, his testimony became the backbone of the case. Autry is now a free man. Let that sink in. The man who said he helped dump Holly's body is walking free. The man who never confessed? Still behind bars. Missing evidence, silent voices. Crucial items from a crime scene went missing. A bloody paper towel from the carport never tested. Potential DNA evidence destroyed. And Holly's cell phone? It pinged multiple towers after she vanished, suggesting she was on the move for hours, even days. That doesn't match the prosecution's story of a quick, brutal murder. And then there's the silence. People in Parsons who say they know more, but are too afraid to talk. Locals whisper about a drug ring, a sex trafficking operation, even possible ties to law enforcement. One anonymous tip to the podcast, "What Happened to Holly Bobo?" said, "Everyone around here knows Zach didn't do it, but we're not allowed to say who did." The podcast that blew it wide open. In 2025, the True Crime Podcast series reignited the case. It wasn't just rehashing the trial, it was investigating what was left out. New witness interviews, phone records never submitted, audio from a police officer who admitted they rushed the case under pressure. The host, a former crime reporter, ended each episode with the same haunting phrase: "If we got it wrong, someone's still out there." The Bobo family's silence. After the trial, the Bobo family disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no media. Some say they just wanted peace. Others believe they've started asking questions of their own. Privately, quietly, painfully. Because if the wrong man is in prison, that means Holly's real killer is still walking free. Is this justice? Or a cover-up too deep for a small town to fight? In the next chapter, we return to Diddy's crumbling empire. Because while one man may be wrongfully locked up, another may have been free for far too long. Smash that subscribe, because we're about to explore how celebrity shields the guilty and buries the truth. Power and protection. What happens when the accused is untouchable? When you're rich, famous, and connected, justice bends. Sometimes it breaks. In Holly Bobo's case, a poor man with a drug record was thrown into prison with no hard evidence. In Diddy's case, a media empire, a legal firewall, and $1 million silence machine, all standing between him and the truth. So here's the question. Does power protect the guilty and punish the powerless? It's a story told in two worlds. In one, a small-town girl is taken, possibly murdered by people with deep local connections. The case falls apart, is stitched together with jailhouse deals, and justice is declared, despite the gaping holes. In the other, a hip-hop titan faces horrifying allegations from over a dozen accusers, but walks free. His homes are raided, his name tarnished, yet he hasn't even been charged. Two crimes, two broken systems, two Americas, the celebrity shield. Diddy didn't just build a music empire, he built a legal machine around himself. Every staff member signs NDAs. Every visitor is monitored. Every threat is handled quietly. Former employees say the motto was simple: protect the brand at all costs. One insider told reporters, "You think people just disappear from Diddy's world because they got bored? No, they're paid to disappear." When lawsuits came, settlements followed. When the feds came, lawyers answered the door. When accusers spoke, they were drowned in PR spin and threats. It wasn't about truth. It was about control, the media's role, For years, the media turned a blind eye. Diddy wasn't just a musician, he was a mogul. Cover stories, brand endorsements, reality shows. He represented success, legacy, culture. Calling him out? That was bad business. Until it wasn't. The Cassie lawsuit cracked the narrative. The floodgates opened. And suddenly, the media was hungry again. But the question lingers. Why did it take so long? How many victims were silenced while everyone smiled on the red carpet? Compare that to Holly. In Parsons, Tennessee, there was no brand to protect, no PR team, no lawyers waiting in Manhattan. Just a terrified town, a grieving family, and a community desperate for answers. Zach Adams didn't have an empire. He had a drug problem, and that made him a perfect scapegoat. The police needed to close the case. The town needed peace. So the system delivered a name, even if it didn't fit. While Diddy's world deflected, denied, and delayed, Zach was rushed through a case built on whispers. The cost of speaking up. Women who accused Diddy faced everything. Harassment online, legal threats, blacklisting in the industry. Victims in Holly Bobo's circle? They faced intimidation from locals. One anonymous witness even left town after saying, "I told the police what I knew. I never heard back." But everyone else suddenly knew I had talked. In both cases, the system didn't reward honesty. It punished it, a pattern of silence. The deeper you dig, the more it becomes clear. These stories aren't rare. They're routine. Powerful men, powerless victims, police under pressure, prosecutors eager for wins. The truth becomes optional. Justice becomes theater. And the only thing left behind? The victims and their families. Two names, Diddy and Holly Bobo. Two different cases, but the same chilling truth. The justice system doesn't always chase the guilty. Sometimes, it just chases what's easiest to catch. In the next chapter, we'll expose how the media, the courts, and even the public help cover the truth, while the victims disappear. Hit subscribe, because what you hear next may change the way you see crime forever. Holly's final hours, what we were never told. She was last seen walking into the woods with a man who didn't belong. That's the moment the headlines stopped asking questions and started writing a story that didn't add up. But what really happened to Holly Bobo that morning may be far more disturbing than what we were told. Because the final hours of Holly's life remain a fog, one shaped by fear, lies, and missing pieces. April 13th, 2011, 7:45 a.m. Holly was home, getting ready for a nursing exam. She texted her boyfriend, Drew. Everything seemed normal. But minutes later, she stepped outside and disappeared. Clint Bobo, her brother, saw it happen. He thought she was arguing with Drew. He watched Holly walk into the woods with a man dressed in camouflage. But when Drew's alibi held, Clint realized that wasn't Drew. It was someone else. And by then, it was already too late. The phone pings that changed everything. Holly's phone didn't just go dead. It traveled. For hours, it pinged towers in different directions. 9:25 a.m., 6 miles south of her home. 10 a.m., deeper into the countryside. 10:39 a.m., final ping near a riverbed. That's 2 hours after she vanished. 2 hours where she was alive. 2 hours unaccounted for. 2 hours that should have told a story, but didn't. Investigators never recovered the phone. And the data? Mostly ignored at trial. The man in the woods. Clint described the man Holly walked off with. Camo head to toe. Tall. Stocky. Not someone he recognized. Zach Adams didn't match that description. He was thinner, lankier, and known in the area. So, why would Clint, a local, mistake him for stranger? Some say Clint was in shock. Others believe something worse. That the man wasn't Zach at all. Several people in the area reported seeing a white truck circling the neighborhood that morning. Unfamiliar. Suspicious. Police dismissed it. They never tracked it down. Why? The woods of Decatur County. Weeks turned into months. Thousands searched. But it wasn't until 2014, 3 years later, that her remains were found. Not near her home. Not near Zach's property. But 20 miles away, in a remote area within walking distance of another suspect's trailer. Coincidence? Or something more? The remains were skeletal, weathered by time, scattered. There was no clear cause of death, no proof of sexual assault, no DNA from any suspect. Still, Zach Adams was charged, convicted, buried beneath a mountain of assumptions, what they never showed in court. During trial, prosecutors focused on horror, on Zach's drug use, on jailhouse confessions. But here's what they never showed. No surveillance footage, no weapon, no physical link between Zach and Holly, no blood in his truck, no evidence he was near her that morning. What they did have, testimony from criminals, one of whom later recanted. But by then the conviction was sealed. A web of other suspects. Jason Autry, Shane Austin, Terry Britt, names that came and went. Autry testified to save himself. Austin died by suicide after being named a suspect. Britt, an actual convicted rapist, was questioned, then quietly dropped from the investigation. And get this, Britt matched Clint's original description more than Zach did. Tall, stocky, familiar with the area, a history of abducting women. Still, authorities said he wasn't involved. That decision has haunted the case ever since. The victim's voice lost. Holly's story got buried beneath the spectacle of trial. The truth drowned in deals and dramatics. And today, years later, her voice is still missing. Because when you build a case around what might have happened, you leave out what did. The fear, the silence, the unanswered calls, the phone that kept moving while no one followed. What happened in those 2 hours? Who was in that white truck? And what if, after all these years, we still don't know the real killer's name? In the next chapter, we return to Diddy's crumbling empire. Because while one girl's voice was lost, another group of victims is finally being heard. Subscribe now, because the next chapter reveals how fame builds fortresses around the guilty and what happens when they finally begin to fall. Breaking the silence, survivors versus Diddy. For years, their voices were ignored, dismissed, silenced. He was too powerful, too rich, too connected. But silence has an expiration date. And in 2024, it arrived like thunder. One by one, the survivors of Diddy's empire stepped forward. Not for fame, not for money, but for justice. Because when survivors speak, the empire shakes. It started with Cassie. 10 years with Diddy. 10 years of silence, until she couldn't stay quiet any longer. Her lawsuit read like a horror script. Beatings, isolation, coerced sex acts with strangers, surveillance, constant threats. She said he kept blackmail files, videos of what he forced her to do, evidence of control, of power, of fear. The lawsuit was settled within 24 hours. That silence? It cost millions, but it unlocked a floodgate. After Cassie, the walls cracked. Then they collapsed. More women stepped forward. And their stories weren't just similar, they were hauntingly identical. Young, ambitious, vulnerable, lured in with promises of music, modeling, and stardom. Isolated from family, forced into violent, degrading situations, all under the illusion of the lifestyle. One survivor described being drugged at a party, then waking up with cameras pointed at her and Diddy watching. Another said she was threatened with disappearance if she ever told. The accusations spanned 2 decades, 2 coasts, and multiple victims who had never met but described the same things. The pattern. This wasn't just abuse. It was ritualized control. Victims were flown to events, phones confiscated, signed NDAs, chaperoned constantly. If they resisted, they were cut off. If they stayed quiet, they were rewarded with luxury status protection. It wasn't about consent. It was about submission, a power imbalance so massive it felt inescapable. The investigations go federal. By March 2024, Homeland Security had seen enough. Search warrants were issued, raids executed. Inside Diddy's homes, agents found confidential files, dozens of hard drives, hidden surveillance equipment, and rooms designed to be completely soundproof. That wasn't a party house. that was a fortress. And suddenly, the media turned. So did the public. For the first time, Diddy looked cornered. Legal teams respond, but the damage was done. Diddy denied everything. His lawyers called it all baseless, fabricated, and disgraceful. But the legal battles kept mounting. Civil suits, federal investigations, potential sex trafficking charges, RICO discussions even began circulating online. The accusations were no longer isolated. They were connected, a pattern of control across years and victims. The survivors keep speaking. In April 2025, an explosive documentary aired, featuring 5 anonymous survivors. They didn't show their faces, but their voices, raw, shaking, determined, echoed across the internet. I was 17. He knew it. He told me no one would believe me, and for years I believed him. I'm not suing. I just want people to know. I want it to stop. These weren't actresses. They weren't chasing clout. They were broken and brave, and their stories were finally being heard. The industry reacts. Too little, too late. Record labels quietly distance themselves. Collaborators stopped returning calls. Brands pulled partnerships. Music festivals erased his name. Diddy went from icon to liability. But where were these people when it mattered? Why did it take years of horror to finally listen? The answer is chilling. Because protecting power was more profitable than protecting victims. Cassie lit the match, but the fire is still burning. And as more survivors step forward, the question becomes, how many were there? And how deep does this really go? In the next chapter, we connect the dots between the missing pieces in Holly Bobo's case and the tactics used in Diddy's empire. Because sometimes the patterns of control look exactly the same. Hit subscribe. The truth is unraveling, and we're not done yet. Echoes of control, when victims are chosen, not found. 2 cases, 2 worlds, 1 ugly truth. In Hollywood, women were allegedly selected, isolated, and stripped of control. In rural Tennessee, a bright, young student vanished from her driveway, targeted in broad daylight. But what if both stories are connected by something deeper? Not by people, but by a pattern, because predators don't always find victims by chance. Sometimes they choose them. Control isn't just about power, it's about planning. And whether it's a multi-million-dollar mansion in Miami or a backwoods trailer in Parsons, the tactics are terrifyingly similar. Step 1. Isolate the target. Cassie and many others said Diddy kept them emotionally and physically separated from support. Phones confiscated, travels supervised, NDAs signed, no witnesses, no way out. In Holly Bobo's case, the morning she was taken, her family had just left for work. She was alone, no security, no cameras, no neighbors watching. It was the perfect time. The man in camouflage didn't storm the house. He didn't break in. He waited until she was vulnerable. Then he struck. Step 2. Control the environment. Diddy survivors describe homes designed to trap, rooms with locks, blacked-out windows, security that wasn't there to protect them, but to monitor them. In the Holly Bobo case, the final location where her remains were found was remote, wooded, and nearly impossible to stumble upon. Someone took her to a place they knew no one would look. She wasn't dumped randomly. She was hidden deliberately. Step 3. Blur the truth. After each incident, both cases followed the same path. Confusion, silence, and misdirection. In Diddy's world, victims were allegedly paid off, footage deleted, witnesses silenced. In Holly's case, the original suspects changed. Evidence went missing. The timeline shifted conveniently to fit the theory. And in both cases, the people in power said the same thing. We did everything we could. But did they? Step 4. Choose the right victim. Cassie was young, dependent on Diddy for her career. She trusted him. That made her the perfect target. Holly Bobo, a nursing student, kind, hardworking, trusting, and living in a town where crimes like this were not supposed to happen. She wasn't picked at random. She was chosen because she fit the pattern, isolated, vulnerable, and too trusting. Step 5. bury the evidence and the victim. When the first lawsuits against Diddy surfaced, settlements came fast. Information buried. Public records sealed. In Holly's case, when her bones were found, the investigation rushed to a conclusion. No full autopsy. No cause of death. Just closure, fast and clean. Closure doesn't mean justice. Sometimes it just means someone needed the story to end. Different cities, same darkness. On the surface, these two stories couldn't be more different. One involves a hip-hop mogul with billion-dollar influence. The other, a small-town tragedy wrapped in unanswered questions. But look closer and the thread is clear. Power exploits the vulnerable, whether through fame, fear, or force. And the victims? They pay with their lives, or their sanity, or their silence. So what now? We have survivors speaking out in both cases, details that don't match, evidence that went missing, and systems, legal, media, cultural, that chose convenience over truth. What do we do when the pattern becomes undeniable? When the system that should protect us fails us instead? The echoes between these cases are more than coincidence. They're warnings. In the next chapter, we ask the ultimate question: what does justice look like when it's already been denied? Can it be rebuilt? Subscribe now, because coming up, we confront the aftermath and what's still at stake. Justice or illusion, what we accept when the truth is inconvenient. They tell us justice was served, that the guilty were punished, that the victims found peace. But what if all of that was a lie? A performance meant to satisfy the headlines, not the truth? Because when the system fails, we don't just lose justice, we lose trust. And sometimes, the illusion is more dangerous than the crime. In 2017, Zach Adams was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Holly Bobo. The media called it closure. The DA called it victory. The town called it healing. But deep down, the people of Parsons knew something didn't feel right. No clear motive, no cause of death, no hard evidence, just jailhouse rumors, and a need to move on. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, Sean Diddy Combs still walks free. Accusation after accusation, raid after raid, settlement after settlement, but no arrest, no charges, no justice. Yet, his victims? They got payouts, gag orders, and trauma that never healed. And the public? They got a press release and then moved on. So, we ask, is this justice? Justice isn't supposed to be about headlines or closure. It's about truth. But in both of these stories, the truth was too messy. In Tennessee, they locked someone up to restore calm. In Los Angeles, they paid people off to protect a brand. Different strategies, same goal, avoid accountability. What happens when the wrong person goes to prison? Zach Adams may be guilty, or he may be innocent. But when a case is built on shaky witnesses and missing evidence, we don't get justice, we get convenience. And the cost of that? The real killer stays free. The town is lied to, and the victim's story is rewritten to fit a verdict. A false ending with no peace. What happens when the guilty walk free? Diddy's accusers described systematic abuse, coercion, rape, trafficking, some for years. Yet the justice system moved slowly, too slowly, because prosecuting the rich? That's complicated, expensive, risky. And in the end, money wins. Because money can delay, erase, distract, buy silence. The illusion we settle for. The public is fed stories of closure, big trials, headlines, emotional verdicts. We cry, we cheer, we move on. But real justice? That takes time, courage, truth, and none of that fits neatly in a news cycle. So, who protects the victims? In Holly's case, her family was told to trust the system, that the investigation had answers, that the right man was behind bars. But every year since, new questions surface. What about the white truck? The other suspects? The destroyed evidence? In Diddy's world, survivors were told to move on. Take the settlement, be quiet, forget. But their trauma doesn't vanish with a check. Their truth doesn't fade just because the spotlight does. The real verdict, Maybe the harshest truth is this. Sometimes, justice isn't served. It's staged, so we, the public, feel safe. So, the media has a clean ending. So, prosecutors can hang a case on the wall and move on. But the survivors? They live in the aftermath. And the audience? We're left with a story, but not the truth. If this is justice, we should be afraid, because the next victim might not get headlines. They might not get a trial. They might not even get believed. In the final chapter, we bring it all home. The fallout, the future, and the one question that haunts both cases. What happens when truth is no longer enough? Tap that subscribe, because everything we've uncovered leads to one final reckoning. Aftermath, what we choose to see and what we ignore. When the headlines fade, what's left? A grieving family, a forgotten victim, survivors who spoke and were never heard. Two names, Holly Bobo and Sean Diddy Combs, linked not by crime, but by consequence. Because in the end, it's not just about who committed the crime. It's about who gets to walk away and who never does. This is the aftermath, and it's not clean. Parsons, Tennessee. Today, there's no sign of what happened on that April morning in 2011. No monument, no plaque, just trees, silence. The same woods that swallowed Holly Bobo still stand, untouched, unchanged. Her family stays out of the media. Their pain? Quiet, invisible, lifelong. They were told justice was served, but the doubt never left. Because when you're handed a story with missing pieces, you start asking questions no one wants to answer. Hollywood, California. Diddy's name no longer dominates headlines. The frenzy has quieted. The news cycle has moved on. But for his alleged victims, the trauma is permanent. Some have gone underground. Some continue to speak, hoping someone, somewhere, is still listening. Most just want to be believed. They didn't ask for fame. They didn't want attention. They wanted safety. They wanted it to stop. And when the system didn't protect them, they protected each other. Two crimes. No closure. Let's be clear. This isn't about comparing grief. It's about exposing a system that constantly fails the vulnerable. In Holly's case, a rushed investigation, convenient suspects, and a town desperate for resolution. In Diddy's case, $1 billion shield of power, silence, and delay. And in both stories, the truth was there all along. But we ignored it, or denied it, or found it too uncomfortable to confront. The role we play. We, the audience, love a clean ending. A villain. A trial, a verdict, but real life doesn't give us that. Real justice is messy, delayed, unfinished. We watched Holly Bobo's case and believed what we were told. We heard Diddy survivors and asked, why now? Because we're trained to doubt the victim, to protect the powerful, to move on quickly. But when we move on too fast, real justice never catches up. The truth doesn't fade. Holly's body may be buried, but her story isn't. And for every Diddy accuser silenced by a threat or a settlement, a new survivor is watching, waiting, preparing to speak. They're not stories. They're people. And their lives don't end when the media stops caring. So, what happens now? Maybe Zach Adams rots in prison for a crime he didn't commit. Maybe Diddy faces charges, finally, or maybe they both walk free. But the question isn't just about what happened. It's about what we allow to happen again and again. Because if we don't listen, if we don't question, if we don't care, then the next victim is already out there. And we'll do this all over again. If you made it this far, thank you. Not just for watching, but for staying with the uncomfortable truth. Now ask yourself, would you have believed Holly's story if she lived to tell it? Would you have heard Cassie or the others before the lawsuits? If we want justice, we have to demand more. From our systems, from our media, from ourselves. So share this story. Keep it alive, because silence protects predators. But truth protects everyone else. Like, subscribe, and never stop asking, what are we being told?